Welcome to another deep dive. It is really great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
If you're listening right now, you are probably, someone who is constantly juggling a million things,
Right.
but you refuse to just skim the surface of what's happening in the world. You want to understand the really structural shifts happening right now. And you want the nuance behind these terrifying or, I guess, triumphant headlines without having to read 1,000 pages of policy documents.
Which, trust us, is a lot of reading.
It is a staggering amount of reading. So you value your time, you are deeply curious, and you are in exactly the right place. Today, we are bringing you it's a did you hear about this kind of conversation.
Absolutely.
And fair warning, it is going to fundamentally change how you look at that helpful, friendly little AI assistant sitting on your phone or your desktop right now.
Yeah, the one you probably just used to write an email.
Exactly. Because we were talking about the sudden, dramatic, and completely unprecedented collision of consumer artificial intelligence and kinetic military operations.
It's a profound structural shift in how power operates today. We are witnessing this real-time transition from AI being a tool used to, draft corporate memos or summarize meeting notes to AI being actively integrated into the kill chain of modern warfare.
Right.
And the speed of this transition has caught nearly everyone completely off guard, from the lawmakers in Washington to the tech industry leaders in Silicon Valley.
To unpack this for you, we have gathered a massive stack of source material. We're looking at recent, deeply researched investigative reports from the Washington Post, The Intercept, and The Guardian.
Some really heavy-hitting journalism there.
Very heavy. We also have the official Department of Defense strategy memos from early 2026, public statements and corporate manifestos from the CEOs of the major AI companies, and incredibly detailed legal analysis from organizations like the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute.
Which we'll probably just refer to as SPRI today.
That's right, SPRI, as well as the legal platform Lawfare. Now, before we jump into the timeline of events, I need to offer a very clear, very important disclaimer.
Yeah, we need to set the ground rules for this one.
These sources contain highly politically charged events. We are going to be discussing military operations conducted by the United States and Israel, strikes against Iran, and specific administrative directives coming from the Trump administration.
So we want to be explicitly clear to you, the listener.
Yes. We are taking absolutely no political sides here. We are not endorsing any specific military action, nor are we endorsing any specific corporate or political ideology.
None at all.
Our mission today is strictly and impartially to report the facts, the viewpoints, and the arguments contained in this source material. We're just here to help you understand the technological landscape and the unprecedented standoff between Silicon Valley and the Pentagon over who actually controls the ethics of the most powerful technology on Earth.
It is a complex, tangled web of corporate policy, national security imperatives, and international humanitarian law.
It really is.
Our goal today is just to untangle that web neutrally and thoroughly so you can see the architecture of what is actually happening behind the scenes.
And before we get into that timeline, a quick thank you to our sponsor, www.breach.company, for supporting our ability to bring you these deep dives.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yes, we have to start with the inciting incident.
Yeah.
This is the event that dragged all of these highly theoretical, academic debates about AI ethics out of the conference rooms and into a stark, devastating reality.
Right.
We're talking about early March 2026. And a United States military operation called Operation Epic Fury.
The scale described in the reporting it's difficult to wrap your head around, honestly.
It is. According to the sources, the U.S. military struck over 1,000 individual targets in Iran within the first 24 hours of the campaign.
Just pause on that number for a second.
1,000 targets in a single day.
Right. If you think about a traditional human command structure, finding a target, verifying it, getting a lawyer to look at the rules of engagement, getting a commander to authorize the strike, and then actually putting a munition on that target.
It takes time.
That tempo seems entirely impossible for humans. How does a military apparatus physically move that fast?
And that tempo is the crucial entry point into understanding this new era. Right?
Exactly. The human mind and human bureaucratic structures simply cannot process intelligence, verify the legitimacy of targets, and authorize strikes at that volume and velocity.
No way.
The traditional military kill chain, which is typically summarized as find, fix, track, target, engage, and assess, is a very deliberate, human-intensive process.
Right.
But the military was able to achieve this new compressed tempo because of a specific technological architecture called the Maven Smart system, which was developed by the defense contractor Palantir.
Okay, but here's the crazy part. The actual brain powering this system's reasoning, the engine parsing the sheer volume of data, was Anthropic's Claude.
Yeah.
Claude. Just to be absolutely clear for the listener, you mean the same consumer large language model that people use to help them write Python code, or draft a marketing email, or, I don't know, plan a weekly dinner menu.
Yeah. That is the exact model. It is a large language model, or LLM. According to the investigative reporting, Claude was integrated to process vast streams of classified data.
What kind of data are we talking about?
We are talking about real-time satellite imagery, massive amounts of communications intercepts, logistics movements, radar signatures.
All being fed into Claude.
All of it.
Yeah.
The reports suggest that Claude proposed hundreds of targets, provided precise geographical coordinates for those targets, and even evaluated the battle damage of the strikes in real time.
Wow.
It took a process that would normally require a room full of highly trained human intelligence analysts, weeks of painstaking battle planning, and compressed it into a matter of minutes.
That compression of time is staggering, but it immediately brings us to the human cost, which is deeply tragic and forms the core of the ethical debate we're going to explore.
Yeah, it does.
The sources detail a specific strike during this early March campaign on the Shajara Tayyibeh Girls' School, located in the South Iranian city of Manab. The reports indicate that 165 students and staff members were killed.
It's horrific.
And it was reportedly what is known in military terms as a double tap strike. For those who aren't familiar, a double tap means a second munition hits the exact same site shortly after the first.
Usually right at the moment when first responders, neighbors, and parents have rushed to the scene to pull survivors from the rubble.
Exactly. Now, the Pentagon has firmly refused to confirm whether Claude specifically nominated that school as a target.
The Pentagon's silence on the specific chain of events regarding that school leaves the direct accountability unconfirmed. However, the broader integration of AI into these strike systems and the tempo we just discussed highlights a well-documented and incredibly dangerous psychological phenomenon called automation bias.
I think most people have experienced a low-stakes version of automation bias.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like when your GPS tells you to turn down a dirt road. You're looking out the windshield, you see it's a private driveway, or it leads directly into a lake, and your brain is screaming that it's wrong.
But you do it anyway.
You do it anyway, because the computer knows best, and the computer has access to satellites, so who are you to argue with the GPS?
That is the perfect everyday analogy. Now scale that psychological tendency up to a lethal environment. When humans are partnered with highly advanced machines, especially machines that operate at a speed far beyond human cognitive capability and present their findings with absolute machine-like confidence, we have a profound tendency to defer to the machine's perceived authority.
We just abandoned our own critical thinking.
We do. And we have stark historical parallels documented in the source material that show how this plays out in warfare. Look at the investigative reports concerning Israel's use of AI targeting systems, which were known as Lavender and Gospel, during the war in Gaza.
The numbers in those reports were just staggering.
They really were. According to the coverage, the Lavender system generated 37,000 potential targets. And importantly, it had a known accepted false positive rate of around 10%.
10%.
Yet the human operators tasked with overseeing the system reportedly spent as little as 20 seconds verifying these targets before authorizing a strike.
20 seconds. I want the listener to really picture that scenario.
Yeah, put yourself in that room.
You are a targeting officer. You are sitting in a classified facility staring at a screen. A highly advanced computer system, one that processes more data in a single second than you could read in your entire lifetime, tells you that a specific building is a hostile target.
Right.
It gives you a coordinate. You have 20 seconds to decide whether to authorize the use of lethal force. In 20 seconds, do you realistically have the cognitive capacity or even the professional confidence to dig into the raw intelligence, cross-reference the data, and disagree with the machine?
The reality is you don't. It creates a structural illusion of control.
An illusion.
Exactly. The human is technically in the loop. Their presence satisfies a bureaucratic and legal requirement that a human makes the final decision on lethal force. But functionally, the human is just a rubber stamp.
They're just pushing the button the machine tells them to push.
The machine is driving the operational tempo, and the human is just struggling to keep up with the conveyor belt of targets. This dynamic, this abdication of human judgment to an algorithm, is the exact scenario that terrified the leadership at Anthropic.
And that leads us to the unprecedented core conflict we are seeing between the tech sector and the government.
Which brings us to Anthropic's unique position in the tech ecosystem.
Right, because they are not just another Silicon Valley startup trying to move fast and break things. They were founded specifically on the premise of AI safety.
They championed a developmental framework called constitutional AI.
And we should define what that actually means, because it is central to the legal and ethical standoff.
Definitely. Constitutional AI isn't just a marketing slogan. It is a technical approach to training a model. Instead of just having human workers constantly grading the AI's responses, to teach it what is good and bad, which is a process called reinforcement learning from human feedback.
RLHF, for the tech nerds listening.
Right, RLHF. Instead of just that, Anthropic gave the model a literal constitution, a set of core written principles.
So the model is trained to evaluate its own outputs against that constitution.
Exactly. It is essentially baking a set of core values into the neural pathways of the system that it mathematically cannot violate.
And the CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, took those internal values and drew two very distinct non-negotiable red lines for any of their military or government contracts.
Very bold move.
The first red line: no fully autonomous weapons. There must be a meaningful, deliberative human in the loop. His argument, as quoted in the sources, is that today's frontier models are simply not reliable enough for life and death judgment.
Which, given the 20-second rubber stamp issue we just talked about, is a very valid concern.
Absolutely. And the second red line: no mass domestic surveillance of Americans. He called the use of AI to indiscriminately monitor citizens fundamentally incompatible with democratic values.
Those two red lines represent a fascinating assertion of power. You have a private corporation attempting to dictate the moral and ethical architecture of its product, even when the buyer is the ultimate sovereign power.
The United States military.
Exactly. But the Pentagon, operating under Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, fundamentally and aggressively rejected that premise.
They did not take kindly to that.
Not at all. In January 2026, Secretary Hegseth issued an AI strategy memo that completely reshaped the rules of engagement for defense contractors. He demanded that all Department of Defense contracts incorporate standard any lawful use language within 180 days.
I read the excerpts from that memo in the source material, and the language is incredibly blunt. It doesn't sound like typical bureaucratic jargon at all.
No, it's very pointed.
It explicitly called for hard-nosed realism. The memo stated that wokeness, diversity, equity, inclusion, and social ideology have absolutely no place in the DoD.
And most importantly for this standoff, it demanded that AI models purchased by the military must be completely free from internal usage policy constraints that might limit lawful military applications.
Okay, let's unpack this. It is a profound clash of two deeply incompatible worldviews.
Yes, it is.
And before we get too deep into that clash, I want to quickly thank our other sponsor, www.myprivacy.blog, for keeping the show running.
So, looking at these worldviews, the Pentagon's position is rooted in traditional state sovereignty. Their argument is that national defense is the core constitutional responsibility of the state.
Right.
In their view, they cannot have a private vendor in California acting as a shadow ethics committee, vetoing operational capabilities during a geopolitical crisis.
If the military's legal counsel deems a specific action lawful under the international rules of engagement, the technology they purchased with public funds must be capable of executing that action.
Without the software second-guessing the general.
Let's play devil's advocate for the Pentagon for a moment, because their argument has a certain brutal logic to it.
It does.
If the military buys a fighter jet from Lockheed Martin, Lockheed doesn't get to put software in the jet that says, we don't agree with this particular war, so the missile systems are locked.
Right.
The military buys the tool, and the military takes responsibility for how it is used. Why should a software company be treated any differently?
That is exactly the argument the Department of Defense is making. They view Claude as a munition, a logistical tool. But Anthropic's counterargument is that an LLM is not a static tool like a rifle or a jet engine.
It's an engine of reasoning.
Exactly. And because it hallucinates and because it is unpredictable, the manufacturer retains a moral and structural responsibility for its outputs.
So let's look at how this standoff escalated from a contract dispute into a full-blown constitutional crisis. Anthropic's refused to lift its safeguards. They stood firmly by their red lines.
And the retaliation from the government was incredibly swift and severe.
The Trump administration ordered all federal civilian agencies to immediately cease using Anthropic's technology.
But the real hammer blow came from the Department of Defense, which designated Anthropic as a supply chain risk to national security.
That specific designation, supply chain risk, is not a mere slap on the wrist or a temporary suspension, is it?
Not at all. In the context of the modern defense industry, it is essentially the commercial equivalent of the death penalty for an AI company.
Wow.
Historically, the United States government has reserved this designation for foreign adversaries and state-backed entities.
Like who?
The most prominent example is China's Huawei, where the underlying concern was active espionage, backdoor surveillance, or the potential for a foreign government to sabotage American telecommunications.
And they applied that to Anthropic.
Yes. Applying that exact same national security designation to an American company, one based in San Francisco, over an ethical and policy dispute is entirely unprecedented.
I think a lot of people might hear that and think, okay, so Anthropic loses out on some military contracts. They can still sell their chatbot to everyday consumers and regular businesses, right? How does a government label actually threaten the existence of an AI company?
To understand why it's an existential threat, we have to look at the physical mechanics of how cloud infrastructure actually works. Frontier AI models, like Claude or OpenAI's GPT models, require absolutely massive, mind-boggling amounts of computational power to function.
We are talking about vast data centers filled with tens of thousands of specialized, incredibly expensive microchips, usually made by NVIDIA.
Right. And Anthropic does not own all of those data centers. No single AI startup could afford to build that physical infrastructure from scratch.
It's just too expensive.
So instead, they rely heavily on third-party cloud providers to host and run their models. Primarily, they rely on tech giants like Amazon Web Services, AWS, and Google Cloud.
And AWS and Google Cloud happen to hold billions and billions of dollars in their own defense contracts with the government.
Precisely. The web of defense contracting is deeply interconnected. Consider the Joint Warfighter Cloud Capability Contract, the JWCC.
Right, that one is huge.
That single contract is worth up to $9 billion, split among major cloud providers. Now, if the government legally decrees that no defense contractor can do business with an entity labeled a supply chain risk, companies like Amazon and Google are suddenly put in an impossible position.
To protect their incredibly lucrative enterprise-wide defense contracts, they would be legally compelled to sever their ties with the blacklisted company.
They would have to kick Anthropic off their servers. And without that rented cloud infrastructure, Anthropic's models simply go offline. They cease to exist as a functional service for anyone, anywhere in the world.
So it's a structural chokehold. The government is using the leverage of cloud infrastructure to starve Anthropic out.
Yeah, but the government didn't just stop at economic pressure. Secretary Hegseth also threatened to invoke the Defense Production Act, or the DPA, against Anthropic.
The invocation of the DPA in this context is legally fascinating. The Defense Production Act is a law dating back to the Korean War era.
It's an old law.
Very old. It was designed to give the president the emergency authority to direct private industry to prioritize the production of goods for national defense.
We saw it used recently during the COVID-19 pandemic to force factories to build ventilators.
Or historically to prioritize steel shipments for building tanks. It's fundamentally about demanding priority access to existing physical goods. But attempting to apply a 1950s industrial law to the ethics of artificial intelligence is a massive, untested stretch of executive power.
I was reading the legal analysis from Lawfare on this specific point, and they raised a really profound question. Are they just asking Anthropic to hand over the software on a hard drive, or are they demanding something much deeper and more invasive?
That is the pivotal legal question that could define the future of the tech industry.
Exactly. If the government is simply saying, we want priority access to use Claude, and we are going to ignore your terms of service regarding how we use it, that is one legal battle.
But Anthropic's safety guardrails aren't just a separate piece of software that can be uninstalled.
No. Because of that constitutional AI training we discussed earlier, The safety mechanisms are mathematically baked into the neural weights of the model itself.
Right.
To give the Pentagon a version of Claude that is fully capable of directing autonomous lethal targeting or conducting unrestricted mass domestic surveillance, Anthropic might actually have to retrain the model from the ground up.
They would have to actively strip out the ethical architecture they spent years engineering.
Which raises massive First Amendment questions. Can the United States government legally compel a private group of citizens, a private company, to write code, to express values, and to build a tool that the company fundamentally morally rejects?
And there is a glaring, almost absurd irony here that the sources highlight. The government is simultaneously labeling Anthropic a security risk that is so dangerous it must be purged from the entire defense supply chain, while at the exact same time threatening to use emergency wartime powers to seize their product because it is deemed too essential to national defense to lose.
How can a product be both a critical threat and an essential lifeline at the same time?
It's a profound contradiction.
It reveals the true nature of the standoff. It forces us to ask a difficult macro-level question about corporate sovereignty and state power. Does the state have the absolute right to commandeer a private company's moral architecture in the name of national defense?
If a group of engineers builds a tool with built-in hard-coded limitations specifically designed to prevent harm, does the government have the legal and moral right to force them to break those limitations?
That is something I want everyone listening to really think about. If a company builds a safety mechanism into a product, whether it's an AI model, an encryption protocol, or a physical device, does the government have the right to demand the unsafe version?
Well, as this standoff between Anthropic and the Pentagon reached a boiling point, the tech industry did what it always does.
It shuffled the deck and looked for an advantage.
Exactly. Within hours of Anthropic being blacklisted and facing this existential threat to their survival, a major rival swooped in.
Oh, yeah.
Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, announced a rushed, highly publicized deal to put OpenAI's models onto the Department of Defense's classified networks.
The timing of OpenAI's announcement was impeccable, and the messaging was highly calculated. Altman publicly claimed that the DoD had actually accepted OpenAI's versions of the red lines.
He stated that OpenAI's technology would not be used for mass domestic surveillance, and it would not be used to independently direct autonomous weapons.
Which sparked massive confusion across the entire industry.
I mean, if you are following the logic, why would the Pentagon completely crush Anthropic, threaten them with the DPA, and label them a national security risk for demanding these ethical red lines, only to turn around and agree to the exact same red lines with OpenAI a few hours later?
It strongly suggests that the dispute with Anthropic was never really about the specific operational policies.
What was it about then?
It was about who holds the power in the relationship. It was an ideological battle. The Pentagon needed to establish a precedent. The military sets the rules, not the Silicon Valley vendors. Anthropic tried to dictate terms and hold the line. OpenAI approached the situation far more strategically. They engaged in public posturing about maintaining safety while ensuring they secured the lucrative contract and embedded themselves even deeper into the military's permanent infrastructure.
They gave the Pentagon the compliance it demanded, while trying to manage the public relations fallout.
But according to the sources, that move seriously backfired on OpenAI in the court of public opinion.
The reports indicate that over 1.5 million users dropped ChatGPT in protest almost immediately after the DoD deal was announced.
People were furious.
They really were. But beyond the user outrage, the broader institutional tech lobby stepped in. The Information Technology Industry Council, known as the ITI, which represents massive giants like Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Apple, started pushing back against the administration.
And it is vital to notice how they pushed back. The ICI didn't explicitly defend Anthropic's ethical red lines.
Right.
They didn't take a stance on whether AI should be used in warfare. Instead, they defended the process. They framed the Pentagon's actions as a dangerous, arbitrary precedent.
Their argument was that the government should not be able to arbitrarily decide which companies survive and which are destroyed based on vague compliance standards.
Especially without any clear, transparent appeal process. The tech giants recognize that if the government can use the supply chain risk label to crush Anthropic today over a policy disagreement, they can use that exact same mechanism to crush any cloud provider, hardware manufacturer, or software developer tomorrow.
To really understand how wild this cultural shift is, we have to look back at the recent history of Silicon Valley. Let's rewind the clock just a few years to 2018 and an initiative called Project Maven.
This was the Pentagon's initial push to use early forms of artificial intelligence to analyze drone footage.
Google won the contract, and the internal backlash from their employees was explosive. 4,000 Google employees signed a petition refusing to build warfare technology.
High-level engineers resigned in protest.
The old corporate motto, "Don't be evil," was plastered everywhere. Ultimately, the internal pressure was so intense that Google walked away from the contract entirely and published a set of restrictive ethical AI principles.
That moment in 2018 was widely seen as a triumph of Silicon Valley idealism. The workers organized, they said no to military-industrial complex, and one of the largest corporations on Earth backed down.
But the military didn't stop building Project Maven.
No, the Pentagon simply found new partners. Companies like Palantir and Endural stepped in to fill the void. The military helped cultivate an alternative ecosystem of defense tech companies that were culturally aligned with the Pentagon and eager to do the work that Google refused.
And contrast that 2018 Google walkout with what happened just a few years later. Microsoft signed a massive $22 billion contract to provide IVS combat headsets to the U.S. Army.
These are augmented reality headsets designed to overlay tactical data for soldiers in the field.
Microsoft employees protested, arguing that the technology turned real-world warfare into a video game and distanced soldiers from the grim reality of killing. But Microsoft leadership didn't back down.
Not at all.
They completely ignored the employee protests and pushed forward with the contract.
The takeaway from this historical comparison is a massive paradigm shift in the tech industry. The industry has fundamentally moved away from the utopian, anti-war idealism that characterized early Silicon Valley.
Developing frontier AI is incredibly, unsustainably expensive.
These companies are burning billions of dollars every quarter just on compute power and electricity.
And the Department of Defense is one of the only customers on the planet with pockets deep enough to fund that scale of ongoing development.
The tech ecosystem is now heavily, inextricably integrated with the defense ecosystem. The cultural wall between San Francisco and the Pentagon has completely fallen.
And that deep integration brings us to a terrifying technical reality. Let's talk about the actual AI models themselves, the code beneath the controversy.
This is crucial.
I think a lot of people picture AI, even advanced AI, as essentially a super advanced calculator. You put in a math problem or a query, and it searches a database to give you a guaranteed, factually correct answer.
But large language models, whether it is Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini, do not work like that at all.
No, they don't. They are probabilistic prediction engines.
Right, they do not know facts in the way a database does. They predict the next most likely word, or token, in a sequence based on the massive amounts of training data they ingested during their creation.
And because they are fundamentally probabilistic, they hallucinate.
They confidently invent facts, synthesize false connections, and present incorrect information with the exact same tone of supreme confidence as they present the truth.
So how does a probabilistic engine that occasionally hallucinates a recipe or a historical date operate in a war zone?
As one researcher quoted in the sources noted, LLMs are fundamentally brittle. They are prone to catastrophic error when they are taken outside the parameters of their training data.
And you cannot fully capture the chaotic, dynamic, unpredictable nature of a live war zone in a static training dataset.
Exactly. The Federation of American Scientists, the FAS, highlighted the specific dangers of this by introducing a concept they called the lethal trifecta.
The lethal trifecta. Let's break that down. What are the three factors?
The FAS argues that putting consumer AI in a military setting combines three uniquely dangerous factors that scale the risk exponentially. Factor 1. The AI is granted access to highly sensitive classified data.
So it is ingesting real-time intelligence that cannot be publicly verified.
Right. Factor 2. It is exposed to untrusted or explicitly adversarial content. In a war zone, the enemy is actively using disinformation, spoofing radar, and feeding false data specifically designed to trick the intelligence gathering apparatus and, by extension, to trick the AI.
And factor 3?
Factor 3. The AI has the ability to trigger external kinetic actions in the real world.
It isn't just generating a report. It is nominating a physical target for a missile strike.
When you combine an AI's inherent tendency for probabilistic hallucinations with adversarial data and the ability to pull a trigger, the potential for catastrophic failure is enormous.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly pretty scary from an accountability perspective. Law professor Ashley Deeks coined a term for this specific scenario, the double black box.
The double black box perfectly describes the accountability void we're stepping into. Let's look at the first black box. When Anthropic provides Claude to the military via a platform like Palantir, the model is physically moved onto classified military servers.
In DoD terminology, these are Impact Level 5 or Impact Level 6 networks.
Right, highly secure, air-gapped environments. Once the model is inside that network, Anthropic loses all visibility. They cannot monitor the prompts being fed into the system by military operators, and they cannot see the outputs to targets being generated.
That is the first black box, corporate blindness.
The company that built the tool has absolutely no idea if their safety guidelines are actually being followed in practice.
And the second black box is on the military side of the equation.
Exactly. The military operators, the targeting officers, and the commanders making the final life-and-death decisions, they do not fully understand the proprietary neural weights, the specific algorithmic biases, or the exact training mechanisms of the commercial model they are using.
They are trusting a proprietary corporate algorithm to parse intelligence and pick targets, without knowing exactly how the machine arrived at that specific conclusion.
That is military blindness.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, you have a corporation that doesn't know how its weapon is being used, partnering with a military that doesn't fully understand how its weapon thinks.
It is a recipe for disaster, especially when it comes to international humanitarian law and the prevention of war crimes.
We are going to dive deep into the international law aspects of this, but before we do, let's take a quick moment to thank both of our sponsors, www.breach.company and www.myprivacy.blog, for keeping the show running.
If we connect this double black box concept to the bigger picture, we have to look at the findings from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, or CPRI.
They released a profound, deeply researched report analyzing how inherent bias in military AI directly threatens compliance with international humanitarian law, or IHL.
Algorithmic bias is something we hear about frequently in civilian life. We've seen stories about an AI resume screener favoring male applicants over female applicants, or facial recognition software failing disproportionately on people of color because of biased training data.
But how does that kind of civilian algorithmic bias translate to a kinetic war zone?
In a war zone, demographic bias regarding gender, ethnicity, or culture in training data doesn't just lead to an unfair job rejection or wrongful arrest. It leads to lethal targeting errors and war crimes.
Let's look at a specific hypothetical example that Cipari provided to illustrate this danger.
Imagine an AI targeting system that has been trained primarily on historical combat data from past counterinsurgency conflicts. In that historical data, the enemy combatants were predominantly young men who moved in groups, carried rifles, and communicated using encrypted apps on prepaid cell phones.
Okay, so the AI learns that statistical pattern. Young men plus guns plus prepaid phones equals hostile combatant.
Precisely. The machine learns the pattern and applies it ruthlessly. But what happens when that exact same AI system is deployed in a different region with a completely different cultural context?
It wouldn't know the difference.
The AI might scan a rural village via drone footage and identify a group of young men carrying rifles and prepaid phones. The system flags them as an immediate, high-confidence threat.
But because the AI has no understanding of human culture, it completely misses the context that these men might be civilians participating in a traditional festival or a local hunting party, where carrying a weapon is customary and legal.
The AI lacks the human context, but it presents the target to the human operator with machine-level mathematical confidence. This is a 99% match for a combatant.
And that directly violates the core tenets of international humanitarian law, doesn't it?
It violates several foundational principles of IHL. First is the principle of distinction. International law requires that warring parties must constantly and effectively distinguish between combatants and civilians.
If your AI system is inherently biased by its training data to view all military-aged males of a certain ethnicity as hostile threats, it fundamentally fails the distinction test.
Second is the principle of proportionality. A commander cannot legally authorize a strike if the expected civilian harm outweighs the anticipated military advantage.
If the AI hallucinates the strategic value of a target or underestimates the civilian presence in a building, your proportionality calculation is legally and morally void.
And the third principle, which seems the most relevant to the 20-second verification window we talked about earlier, is precautions in attack.
Yes, Commanders have a strict legal mandate to do everything feasible to verify that a target is actually a military objective before striking.
If you are relying on what Palantir's own chief revenue officer called a jagged intelligence.
Meaning an LLM that lacks a basic, grounded understanding of reality.
Exactly. To do your verifying, you are failing your duty of care as a commander. You are outsourcing your legal responsibility to a black box you don't understand.
Which brings us grimly back to the Shajarat Tayyebe girls' school tragedy in Iran. If an AI system generated that target based on a flawed statistical pattern, and a human operator rubber-stamped the strike in 20 seconds because they trusted the machine's authority, who is legally held accountable for those 165 lives.
Is it the AI developer at Anthropic who trained the model?
Is it the tech CEO who signed the DoD contract?
Is it the 24-year-old targeting officer who clicked approve under immense pressure?
Or is it the general who mandated the use of the Maven system in the first place?
The terrifying reality is that international law is not currently equipped to assign accountability in this new algorithmic kill chain. The diffusion of responsibility allows everyone to point the finger at someone else.
The soldier blames the machine, the general blames the contractor, and the contractor claims they didn't know how the machine was being used.
That lack of accountability extends far beyond the battlefield and reaches right into our own homes. We need to shift gears and look at Anthropic's second red line, which was mass domestic surveillance.
The Department of Defense's insistence that AI models be available for any lawful use isn't just about dropping bombs in foreign conflicts. It opens a massive, terrifying door regarding the privacy of everyday citizens.
The intelligence community and the military have long desired the ability to process bulk commercial data. We are talking about geolocation records bought from commercial data brokers, massive troves of web browsing histories, financial transactions, and communication metadata.
For human analysts to manually sift through that scale of data to find patterns is practically impossible.
But an advanced large language model can ingest millions of disparate records and instantly map out the networks, associations, political leanings, and daily routines of millions of everyday citizens.
Dario Amodei was very clear that he viewed this as incompatible with democratic values. If the military and the intelligence apparatus can force an AI company to drop its guardrails under the banner of national security, what actually stops them from using a model like Claude to continuously monitor the digital footprint of every American without a specific warrant?
They could easily argue that analyzing commercially purchased data is a lawful intelligence-gathering activity.
And this synthesizes the macro-level threat perfectly. The standoff between Anthropic and the Pentagon is not just an arcane contract dispute about software licensing. It is a profound crisis of democratic erosion.
Right now, there is absolutely no detailed, comprehensive congressional regulation governing the use of autonomous weapons or the integration of generative AI in the military kill chain.
Congress, the body that is supposed to represent the people, has not written the rules for this new era of algorithmic warfare.
So in the total absence of legislation, the executive branch, specifically the Defense Department, has essentially stepped into the void and decreed that AI safety is subordinate to state power.
By breaking Anthropic's resistance through severe economic threats and the invocation of the Defense Production Act, the government is making a definitive statement. Private ethical guardrails are irrelevant when national security is invoked.
It sets a chilling precedent. It signals to the entire tech industry that absolute compliance with the military's demands is the only path to economic survival.
And it completely sidelines the public and our democratic institutions from the most important debate of our time.
We are allowing administrative memos, closed-door ultimatums, and classified contracts to decide the moral and ethical boundaries of the most powerful technology ever created by humanity.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a massive, defining question for the 21st century. Who should write the laws for these digital armies? Should the moral architecture of AI be decided by unelected tech CEOs in Silicon Valley conference rooms?
Should it be decided by military generals in the Pentagon operating in secret?
Or should it be decided by the public, debating and legislating through transparent democratic institutions? Because right now, the democratic institutions are silent, and the generals are winning the argument by force.
The speed of technological advancement has entirely outpaced the speed of our legislative process. We are operating in a vast legal and moral gray zone, and the precedents being set right now, like legally designating a domestic AI safety company as a national supply chain risk, will define the architecture of global power for decades to come.
Let's quickly recap the astonishing journey we have taken today because we've covered a lot of ground. We started with the jarring reality of helpful, everyday consumer chatbots being integrated into the Palantir Maven system to coordinate a massive 1,000-strike military campaign in Iran.
We unpacked the tragic consequences of that speed, exploring automation bias and the horrific human cost of algorithmic warfare.
We examined the intense, unprecedented showdown between Anthropic's ethical red lines and the Pentagon's absolute demand for unrestricted access, leading to threats of economic destruction via cloud infrastructure and the Defense Production Act.
We watched the tech industry shuffle its loyalties, with OpenAI rushing in to secure contracts, highlighting the historical shift from Google's 2018 anti-war protests to today's deeply integrated defense tech complex.
And we navigated the incredibly complex ethical tightrope of the double black box, the failures of international humanitarian law regarding algorithmic bias, and the looming threat of mass domestic surveillance. It is a massive amount of information to process.
It is a lot, but I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over, one that builds on everything we've discussed today but brings it right back to your daily life.
Okay, let's hear it.
We often hear the phrase that data is the new oil, or in the military context, data is the new ammunition. And these consumer AI models, the Claudes, the ChatGPTs, the models you use every day are becoming the new arsenals.
Millions of us interact with these models daily.
We ask them to fix our code, we ask them to write our emails, we ask them to brainstorm our business strategies or explain complex topics to our kids. Every single time we do that, we are providing human feedback.
We are actively teaching the model how to reason better, how to parse nuance, and how to solve complex problems more efficiently.
Right. We are constantly fine-tuning the engine with our own intelligence. So here's the provocative question to consider. As we feed these models our everyday thoughts, our writing, and our human problem-solving strategies to make them smarter and more capable, do we, as everyday consumers, unknowingly become active contributors to the military supply chain?
By helping to refine the reasoning capabilities of a consumer chatbot, are we inadvertently training the very systems that will be deployed to the battlefield tomorrow?
Are we, in a small but very real way, crowdsourcing the intelligence that will define the future of global conflict?
Wow. That is a heavy, fascinating thought.
Yeah.
Are we all acting as unpaid engineers in the algorithmic kill chain? That is absolutely something to think about the next time you open up a tab and ask an AI to summarize a PDF or draft an email for you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the algorithms around you, keep paying attention to the gray zones, and we will see you next time.